Dr. Stone Season 1 tells the story of Ishigami Senku, a prodigy with a deep interest in science. And at the beginning of the anime, he is shown experimenting in his school laboratory with his friends. But a moment later, a friend named Oki Taiju burst into the lab, saying excitedly to Senku that today he would express his feelings to the girl he likes, Ogawa Yuzoriha. Senku responds as if he has no interest in Taiju's plans. However, he later gives him a love potion that is said to increase people's courage, thereby increasing Taiju's chances of being accepted by Yuzoriha. But he refused the potion. He does not want to cheat in matters of love. So, Taiju went towards the school grounds where Yuzoriha was waiting for him. All his friends who watched from the classroom agreed that she would reject him, but not with Senku. He was sure that Yuzoriha would accept Taiju's confession, and he was even willing to bet 10,000 yen. However, just as Taiju was about to confess his feelings, a blinding green light suddenly enveloped the world, turning all humans into stone. Surprisingly, only humans and pigeons were affected by the light, while other creatures such as dogs and cats were not. And even so, that doesn't mean humans have died. Their consciousness is still active, so they are well aware of their surroundings and what is happening to them. Likewise, Taiju was determined to confess his feelings to Yuzoriha someday, whether he had to wait a year or 1,000 years. Then, about 3,700 years later, the world has now completely changed as if it was back in time immemorial when humans had not yet created civilization. And it was at this point that Senku suddenly broke free from petrification, only to find the world he knew no longer existed. Senku realized he had to do something to survive in this new world, so he decided to make sharp objects out of stone and wood. After that, he made a rope from a tree branch, which he then strung with wood. And voila, he can create fire from these objects. But all that will be in vain if Senku does not eat. So, he made a spear which he used to hunt animals. Unfortunately, his physical strength was weak, so he didn't get any results from his hunting session. Senku immediately realized his weakness, and sooner or later, he would starve to death if he continued to act like a professional hunter. So, he uses his brain. He made an animal trap with which he caught a deer. Senku has mastered making fire, creating sharp weapons, and getting food. The next step is to make shelter and clothes because he can't wear leaf panties forever after all. Long story short, Senku managed to make a simple house within a few months. He is also now wearing trendy clothes. In other words, he already has the basic needs of a human being. But Senku is still a human, and humans cannot live alone. He had proven himself that surviving alone was very difficult and exhausting. Plus, he misses interacting with other people. And so, he starts looking for his childhood friend, Taiju, who is still in a petrified state. He still can't understand how to heal people from petrification. He thought he was able to revive because of natural erosion. But why only he revived while others didn't? After some thought, he concluded that there must be an external factor. Senku remembered when he was still petrified, he was in a cave. So, he returned to the cave, where he later found drops of water from the ceiling mixed with the bat's guano, which contains a compound called nitric acid. Senku guessed that it was the nitric acid that made him free from petrification. He pulled out a few strands of his still petrified hair to prove his assumption and dripped nitric acid on them. Sure enough, the nitric acid can corrode the stones in his hair. Excited, Senku started to collect the acid in a small pot and then poured it over Taiju. But to his surprise, Taiju remained petrified. Likewise, when he tried to sprinkle it on other people who were petrified. The anomaly forced Senku to rack his brain again, trying to find things that might set him apart from other people. He finally assumed that when he was petrified, he never stopped thinking. He counts the time down to the second, letting him know how long he has been petrified. The mysterious light appeared in 2019, and Senku was revived in April 5738. So, in essence, Senku can be free from petrification thanks to nitric acid plus the energy from his brain that he always uses to think. It also explains why rock erosion starts from his head. Left with no choice, Senku carried the stone Taiju on his back to the cave, where he placed him under the drops of acid, hoping Taiju would recover with his willpower. Granted, Taiju may not be the brightest person in his class, but he has a strong will to survive, especially since he wants to meet Yuzoriha again. So not long after, he was freed from petrification. As soon as he was free, Taiju covered his crotch area with a trending outfit, leaf panties. Then he tried to find someone else, and in the process, he found a message that Senku carved on the tree. Through the message, Senku gave a clue how Taiju could find him. Sure enough, after Taiju followed the lead, he finally reunited with his best friend, and the reunion was really touching. Regardless, Taiju's presence really helped Senku. He still bears all the work that requires a brain, but when it comes to jobs that require muscle, Taiju will take over. As for their next plan, Senku wanted to find a way to free the people from petrification. The problem is that not everyone has a brain like Senku or the power like Taiju. Because of this, Senku thought of making a chemical called nitol, which could be obtained by mixing nitric acid with ethanol. Ethanol can be extracted from alcohol, which would be hard to find in this world, but Taiju has an idea of how they can make it. Incidentally, when he was looking for food, he saw a lot of wild grapes around them, and they could try to ferment the grapes into alcohol. After 3 weeks, they turned the grapes into wine and then heated them to extract the ethanol. They mixed the ethanol with the acid and then tested it on a petrified swallow. Their experiments yielded satisfactory results. The compound managed to revive the swallow instantly. Excited by the discovery, Senku and Taiju tracked down Yuzuriha, intending to free her. But just as Taiju picked up the petrified her, a herd of lions appeared and tried to attack them, forcing the two to flee while carrying her. They realized that they couldn't fight the lions, but they know who can stand against them: Shishio Tsukasa, the famous martial artist, dubbed the strongest primate on Earth. So, without wasting any more time, they ran to where Tsukasa was and freed him. The strongest primate turns out to be not just a silly nickname. He was able to beat the lions with his bare hands. Now, Senku and Taiju have a new ally in the strongest primate, who immediately returns the favor by hunting animals for them to eat. Even so, Senku feels anxious about Tsukasa because, after all, he is the strongest human being, at least right now. And if he turns into evil, they couldn't possibly stop him. Therefore, Senku secretly planned to create a weapon in anticipation of his worries turning into reality. Well, this strongest primate may look terrible to others, but Tsukasa is also a human with a past, a very dark past. He told Senku about it while they were at the beach. So, when Tsukasa was little, he once looked for shells on the beach for his sister. But when he was busy hunting, a big man suddenly came and beat him, arguing that he had stolen the shells. Although the incident sounded slightly ridiculous, it played a huge role in shaping his current personality. Tsukasa thought not everyone deserved to be freed from petrification, especially those greedy and rotten, who would most likely taint the stone world in which they live today. He was afraid that if civilization returned to normal one day, the rulers and rich people would again oppress the weak, just like in the past. And he doesn't even want modern technology to return because he thinks humans will use it to start wars and destroy the world. So instead of repeating past mistakes, Tsukasa thinks now is the right time to fix the world. To that end, he asks Senku to only resurrect his chosen ones, with whom he will establish a new world order. But Senku couldn't agree with Tsukasa's crazy idea. He wants to free everyone without exception and restore civilization, a civilization focused on science. Two people with two different goals. It certainly makes conflict inevitable. During this tense situation, Taiju arrives and accidentally reveals nitric acid, allowing Tsukasa to know the secret to revive people from petrification. And so, he went to check into the nitric acid cave while Senku and he were getting ready to escape from Tsukasa. But before that, they freed Yuzuriha first. After Yuzuriha returned to her normal state, they went to a mountain to make weapons. Their plan was to make gunpowder which they would use for firearms. No matter how strong Tsukasa is, he will still die if he receives a bullet to his head. But it seems difficult to beat Tsukasa because he is not a man who only relies on his muscles. He's also pretty smart. When he returned to Senku's base camp and found Senku and Taiju not there, he immediately suspected them. And so, following their footsteps, Tsukasa started running after them. And he didn't have to bother looking because a moment later, a loud explosion followed by smoke rose high in the distance. There were no more humans around. The smoke must be coming from Senku and the others, he thought. Tsukasa's guess was true. The smoke did come from the people he was chasing. The smoke came from the gunpowder that accidentally exploded while Senku and the others were concocting it. But a moment later, suddenly, there was an explosion from another direction as if someone wanted to give them a signal. But that also meant someone else freed from the petrification besides the four of them. But before they could think much about it, Tsukasa had arrived at their location, and to make matters worse, he held Yuzuriha hostage. He threatened Senku, asking him to give him the revival fluid formula. If he refused, Tsukasa would kill her, and it would be easy for him to do so. Having no choice, Senku was forced to tell Tsukasa the formula for revival fluid, including the function of alcohol in its compounding. But then he decides to kill Senku after getting the formula because, after all, Senku could be a threat to his new world order plans. Moreover, he saw how Senku planned to make a weapon to harm him, even though his experiment failed for some ridiculous reason. And so, with one strike, he broke Senku's neck. But luckily, Senku has Taiju. Knowing his friend was in danger, Taiju immediately detonated the remaining gunpowder and then used the smoke that enveloped the area to take Senku and Yuzuriha away. After feeling safe, he tried to give first aid to Senku, although his efforts ended in vain. But Taiju still didn't want to give up. He tried to find a way to save Senku until he finally realized that there was a small part of Senku's nape that was still petrified. Without thinking twice, he splashed revival fluid on it, making the nerves in his neck recover as the stone shattered. As a result, Senku got up and recovered healthily. Shortly after surviving his near-death experience, Senku devised a new plan to deal with Tsukasa. He asks Taiju and Yuzuriha to pretend to join Tsukasa so they can spy on him. As for Senku himself, he will look for the person who sent the smoke signal earlier. With that, they parted ways to carry out their respective missions. This also marks the beginning of Senku and Tsukasa's efforts to achieve their goals. He intends to establish a kingdom focused on science, while Tsukasa has the ambition of establishing an empire according to his ideals, which are based on strength and power. After parting ways with Taiju and Yuzuriha, Senku continued to look for the person who made the smoke sign. But in the end, Tsukasa found the person first, who turned out to be a girl named Kohaku. She saw how Tsukasa was trying to kill Senku, and, feeling that he was a dangerous man, she immediately attacked him. In his battle with Kohaku, Tsukasa tries to analyze where she might come from. Indeed, she sounds strange because she calls and views science as magic, indicating that she is a primitive person, not a modern person who has just been freed from petrification. Realizing this, Tsukasa decided not to kill her. After all, he only targets people who favor science and want to return the world to the way it was. And so, Tsukasa felled a tree to trap her, rendering her unable to move as she was crushed by the tree. Fortunately, after Tsukasa left, Senku arrived at the scene and found Kohaku. But since he couldn't move the big tree, he made a pulley to lift the tree and save her. As a thank you, Kohaku then took her to the village where she lived, whose entrance was guarded by two people, Kinro and Ginro. Just like her, those two people didn't understand science either. But to Senku's surprise, one of the villagers is interested in science. His name is Chrome. Since he was little, Chrome liked collecting different stones to experiment with. And if the experiment was successful, he proudly called it magic. Senku immediately asked to be allowed into Chrome's laboratory, where he examined various kinds of scientific materials and medicinal plants. Chrome admitted that he had collected the medicinal plants on purpose. He is trying to find a cure for Ruri, the daughter of the village chief and Kohaku's sister, who suffers from a congenital disease. Ruri had given up herself to her illness, but not Kohaku and Chrome. Senku thought that Ruri's illness might be cured with antibiotics, but making antibiotics in the Stone Age like this isn't easy, even for him. Plus, they must also make the necessary equipment to go through various complicated stages. But that doesn't mean it's impossible to make antibiotics. First of all, they had to make iron. So Senku, Kohaku, Chrome, and another villager, Suika, went to a nearby river to collect iron sand. Then, after the iron sand has accumulated enough, they have to heat it in the furnace at a temperature of 1,500 degrees. But unfortunately, just the four of them weren't enough to heat the furnace. They need help from the residents. Of course, Senku and the others couldn't just make them work for nothing. To persuade the residents, they needed a strategy, and he had a great idea. He would persuade the residents by making them modern food, something they had never tasted before. And so, Senku and the others started gathering the ingredients to make the meal. They collect asparagus fern, which they then turn into flour. After that, they mix it with eggs and then stir until it becomes a dough. The dough should be cut into thin strips before boiling in a hot pot. For the sauce, they use chicken and fish broth, and as a final touch, they add meat to it. Can you guess what they made? It's ramen, of course. Yes, it's only natural that Senku chooses to make ramen. Who would refuse ramen? Everyone loves it, including the villagers. However, just as everyone was happily sipping their ramen, a suspicious person suddenly appeared in their midst, and that person is also holding a bowl of ramen. It turns out that that person is Asagiri Gen, a modern human who was freed from petrification by Tsukasa. In his previous life, he was a magician. That's why he could suddenly appear like that and secretly take a bowl of ramen. Regardless, he came to the village to spy and confirm whether Senku was really dead. But deep down, he actually really admires Senku. Senku and the others let him stay in the village because now they had more important business to make iron. Long story short, after they succeeded in making iron, they moved on to the next stage, making electricity generators. To do so, they wrapped an iron rod with copper and brought it up high, which was hit by lightning, making it a powerful magnet. The magnets were eventually used as electricity generators. Later that night, Senku showed everyone what electricity was. He climbed onto the roof of the house and turned on the lamp with the electricity, making those who saw it amazed. But then, a surprising thing happened. While alone in the forest, Gen was attacked by one of the villagers, causing severe injuries. Senku and his friends took good care of him, and it touched his heart that he decided to defect to Senku's science kingdom. As indicated by Gen asked Senku to make him a bottle of cola. A few days later, Gen immediately returned to Tsukasa's place after the wound healed. But this time, he acts as Senku's spy alongside Taiju and Yuzuriha. Meanwhile, after investigating, Senku and the others finally find the culprit who attacked Gen. He is Magma, the strongest fighter in the village after Kohaku. Not only that, but he is also the strongest candidate to become the village head. This village has a tradition of holding a fighting tournament, in which the tournament winner has the right to become the village head and marry Ruri. In the previous tournament held last year, Magma was defeated by Kohaku. But since Kohaku is Ruri's sister, her victory is not considered. So, since the tournament had yet to produce a winner, it would be repeated this year, with Magma again being a strong candidate for the winner. But Senku and his friends don't want Magma to be the winner because if he wins the tournament and marries Ruri, it will make their plan to heal her even more difficult. It seems Magma wasn't the man who would allow others to approach his wife. Therefore, they began to divide the tasks. Kinro and Ginro will train with Kohaku, while Senku and Chrome will continue to make antibiotics. The thing that Senku needs right now is a glass case. But before they made the container, he took the time to make glasses for Suika, who was nearsighted. And to make things easier, he put the glasses on the mask that she often wore. She cried happily as she could clearly see the beauty of the scenery around her. After making glasses for Suika, Senku and Chrome resumed their work on making glass cases. But unfortunately, their work always ends very badly. At this moment, Chrome was reminded of a resident with excellent hand skills. He is Kaseki, a muscular old man who designs the village's bridge and equipment. With the help of that tough geezer, Senku and Chrome finally managed to make the thing they needed. Then, the next step is to make sulfuric acid, a chemical compound that contains poison. But that's not a problem for Senku, who already knows what a mask is. Without much difficulty, they managed to get sulfuric acid from its source. And finally, Senku and Chrome need one more ingredient, sake. But they had no intention of putting it in Ruri's medicine. Senku just wanted the residents to be able to celebrate the end of the tournament with sake. The next day, a fighting tournament between village warriors was held. Senku, Chrome, Ginro, Kinro, and Kohaku participated in the tournament. But Kohaku ends up unable to participate in the tournament because Magma has already implemented his devious plan to have her disqualified. Before the tournament, he kidnaps Suika and hides her, forcing Kohaku to look for her. She was in charge of finding Suika because, after all, she was the strongest fighter the village had. And so, without waiting for Kohaku to return, the tournament began, with the first battle pitting Magma against Kinro. Kinro is actually a strong and great fighter, but he has one fatal flaw: he suffers from nearsightedness, just like Suika. Luckily, Suika came back at just the right time. Seeing Kinro fighting, she threw her mask at him so he could borrow it. Wearing the mask, Kinro could anticipate and dodge all of Magma's attacks before launching a counterattack that cornered him. As if realizing he couldn't beat his opponent, Magma protested the referee for letting Kinro wear a mask. His protest automatically made him turn his attention to the referee to see if he was allowed to wear a mask. But that was precisely what Magma had been waiting for. As soon as he was caught off guard, Magma immediately attacked him from behind. Ultimately, Magma managed to win the fight with his cunning methods. Chrome successfully defeated his opponent in the second fight. Then, in the third battle, Senku, who should have fought against Kohaku, came out victorious since she still hadn't returned to the arena. In the semifinals, Chrome must face Magma. But in truth, he was no match for the sly man. Magma's physical strength was far superior to Chrome's, making their duel look more like torture than a fair fight. However, when his body was already battered, Chrome finally found a way to defeat Magma using Suika's glasses and sunlight. He burned Magma's body, making him scream in the heat of the fire, and thus made Chrome the victor of the fight. Senku also won in the semifinals, so the final battle pitted Chrome and Senku to fight against each other. But apparently, Chrome was badly injured from his battle with Magma, leaving him with no energy to fight. And so, the winner of that tournament was Senku. With this, he was automatically appointed as village head. After the tournament, Senku immediately processed the medicine for Ruri and gave it to her as soon as the medicine was ready. He continued to give her the medicine for the next few days until she finally recovered from her illness. Senku's values and victory in the tournament made the villagers trust him even more. They all agreed to appoint him as the new village head. And as the village head, he practically has the right to know the village's history. But what he heard from Ruri about the village's history made him tremble in shock. It turns out that the village's name is Ishigami, just like his surname. So, what really happened? Why is the name of the village exactly the same as Senku? To find out, we need to go back in time to just before the petrification incident. At that time, Senku's father, Ishigami Byakuya, worked as a representative astronaut from Japan. He and 5 other people were on the International Space Station when the petrification event occurred. 5 people were Lillian Weinberg, Shamil, Daria, Yakov, and Connie. They could only watch from outer space as a mysterious green light enveloped the Earth. Worried, they then decide to return to Earth, only to find everyone else petrified. They weren't sure if other people were still alive, and they didn't know how to get people back to normal either. Therefore, they try to survive with just the 6 of them. They built a village and reproduced it until finally, the village grew into Ishigami Village with many residents. So, all the villagers that Senku now saw in front of him were descended from the 6 astronauts, including his father. In the present, all the villagers are celebrating the appointment of a new village leader. But during the celebration, Ruri takes Senku to the graves of their ancestors, where she shows him a message from Byakuya, who is sure that someday Senku will revive. Therefore, he ordered Senku to rebuild civilization to save mankind. Upon his return to the village, Senku meets with Gen, who informs him that the Tsukasa Empire has sent soldiers to take over Ishigami Village. Sure enough, a few moments later, they came to attack led by Tsukasa's right-hand man, Hyoga. Like Tsukasa, Hyoga also has great fighting abilities, which makes him entrusted to lead the troops. But Senku already has a plan to deal with them, even if it's only a temporary plan. He used the remaining gunpowder to frighten off the invaders, bluffing that the Science Kingdom had manufactured large quantities of firearms. Hearing that, Tsukasa's troops became frightened and decided to retreat for the time being. Senku is well aware that Tsukasa's troops will attack again if a storm arrives because the storm will render firearms unusable. Therefore, he used the remaining time to make new weapons, namely the katana. With the fighting power of Kohaku, Magma, Kinro, and the others, the people of the Science Kingdom managed to destroy the stone weapons of the invaders as the battle began. But that doesn't mean Hyoga just gave up. He ordered one of his girl named Homura to burn the bridge in the village while Senku was focused on fighting him, thus giving them a chance to launch a surprise attack. In this precarious state, Suika takes the initiative to lure Tsukasa's troops to the source of sulfuric acid. And as if realizing her plan, Senku and Kohaku immediately followed her with masks. In the end, the Kingdom of Science won the war after many of Tsukasa's troops died from inhaling the poisonous gas of sulfuric acid. Hyoga and Homura managed to save themselves by climbing a tall tree to escape the poisonous gas. The Tsukasa Empire did suffer a crushing defeat in the war against the Science Kingdom, but that didn't mean they were destroyed. They would attack again for revenge, and Senku knew that. That's why he planned to make calls, to anticipate if Tsukasa's troops attacked again someday. He wanted to make firearms, but unfortunately, he lacked materials because he needed nitric acid and shells to make gunpowder. Meanwhile, the Tsukasa Empire had taken over the nitric acid cavern. So inevitably, Senku had to change his strategy. Instead of making firearms, he decided to make telephones, which he felt were very important devices in warfare. Just by using that device, one could carry out the task of being a spy more easily. They can infiltrate enemy premises, investigate their weaknesses, and immediately report to Senku as soon as they find them. Of course, just making a phone is a long and complicated process. But for the sake of brevity, Senku had to build a water wheel, which was combined with a generator. That way, they could build a hydroelectric power plant, a component badly needed to make a phone work. But it didn't stop there because they had to make electrical storage containers, batteries, and light bulbs. Their purpose in making these items was to use them as a light source as they dug in the dark caverns, which contained the most heat-resistant metal, tungsten. It was only after they had obtained all the materials and equipment that Senku and the residents of the Kingdom of Science were finally able to build a cell phone. This is where the end of Dr. Stone's Season 1. You can check out Dr. Stone's second season video to find out what happened next and the end of the war between the Kingdom of Science and the Tsukasa Empire.